As in our prior async tasks, we define the doInBackground method to specify what should be performed in a separate thread of execution. And in this case, we're going to be performing our web service call and then the parsing of the JSON object that's returned to extract the data that we need from that object. So the first thing we do at line 60 through 62 is create a URL object that represents the URL of the web service with any arguments that we need to pass into the web service. Now, as we construct that new URL object, we're passing in this highlighted string concatenated code where we're first looking up in our values, our strings.xml file rather, the value for location URL pre-zip code. So if I go over to strings.xml, you can see here is the string that we're talking about, and I've hard-coded into my strings.xml file the beginning part of the web service URL up through where we're specifying the zip code parameter. Then we add to that the zip code string, and we add to that an ampersand to separate the first argument from the second. The name of the next argument is the API key argument, and then you say API key equals, and where you see the words your API key here, this is one of the locations in our code where you need to insert your own API key. So in a functioning version of this app, you'll have a very long string of uppercase and lowercase characters and possibly digits that represents your API key, which would be obtained by registering for it via the WeatherBug website. Now, at line 65 and 66, we then create a reader called Forecast Reader as a new input stream reader, which is one of the classes that extends reader. And the input stream reader is initialized with url.openstream. url.openstream is going to return an input stream. An input stream knows how to read bytes from somewhere. An input stream reader takes those bytes and allows you to read them as character-based data, and we store that in Forecast Reader. Then at line 69, and this is one of the key parts of this chunk of the code, we create a JSON reader using the Forecast Reader. Now the JSON reader knows how to take character-based data and interpret it as JavaScript object notation objects. So once we've created the JSON reader, then at line 70 we call its begin object method, which means we're now reading the first object in the JavaScript object notation data that was returned. Now if you look at the data in the web browser here, you can see once again that we have one master object that has a location attribute, and the value for that attribute is a nested JavaScript object. So when we say begin object, we're now going to read the location attribute value pair. So we've begun the reading of our object, and the first thing we do after that at line 73 is we say to get us the next name. Now next name, if I hover over it here, you see it says it returns the next token, a property name, and consumes it, which means it extracts it from the stream. So this is going to give us back, assuming that the web service call worked correctly, the word location. Now at line 77 we confirm that before proceeding, because if we didn't get back location, then something went wrong with the web service call, and in that case we're going to jump all the way past the if statement and simply return null from this method. So assuming that we properly got the location object back, we know that the value of that location attribute within the JavaScript object that was returned is another JavaScript object. So we call begin object once again, and then we declare a local variable next name string in which we'll keep storing the next attribute name that we read from the JSON object. So while there are more attributes within that object to be read, we will get the next name once again, and then we're going to use this nested if-else statement to figure out what to do with the key value pair. And the reason that's important is there are more key value pairs here than we actually need in this example. We only need for this example the city, the country, and the state. So for the other key value pairs, we want to ignore them. So if the particular string that we just read is the one for the city, then we're going to read the next string, which is the value for the city, in this case Sudbury, and we're going to store it in city string. If the item that we just read is the state, then we're going to read the next string, which is the value, and store it in state string, the value for the state attribute. And similarly, if it's the country, we'll store the country string. For any of the other key names, we will simply call forecast.JSON-reader.skipValue, which skips the value for that attribute and simply extracts it from the stream so that we can move on to the next key value pair within the JavaScript object. Now, once we find that there are no more key value pairs in that object that we were reading, we close the JSON reader, which in turn closes the underlying streams that were feeding the JSON reader and enables us to be done with the process of reading the data. Now, assuming that we don't get any exceptions, we will return null from the doInBackground method, and at that point the onPostExecute method will be called automatically in the GUI thread of execution. Now, if we find that the city string is not equal to null, we know that we got some data back, at which point we'll notify the weather location loaded listener that the data was received by calling its onLocationLoaded method, and that will go display the city information on the screen. Otherwise, we'll display a toast indicating that there was a problem with the processing of the web service call.